Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rosen Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chawla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunella Rosa. This week, we're going to be talking about the American elections. Biden versus Trump. Will it simply be a rematch, much akin to last time's election, or is this time quite different? Brunello, we've discussed these elections several times on the podcast, and it seems like things have evolved quite a bit over the last few months, but it very much gotten us to the inevitable situation we find us in now, which it seems like Biden and Trump are the front runners for the nominations for their respective parties. Tell me more about how we got here.
It's true. I mean, we have spoken about this several times, and of course, we'll continue to do so as the year progresses and we get closer to the election day of the 5th of November. Now, uh, there are two main camps, as we know. Let's forget for the time being the potential third candidates, alternatives that, as we discussed on previous occasions, though, may have their own, especially in each particular state, especially if there's swing states. So every 100 votes would actually make the difference. We saw that in 2000, Gore versus Bush Jr. Eventually, this big election was decided by a few hundred votes in Florida after huge recounting and this and that. So, for the
Mhm.
time being, let's focus on the big picture. Big picture is Democrats versus Republican. Democrats have Biden, and so far, no one else has emerged, and no one else will emerge unless the president decides to step down, something that it doesn't seem inclined to do for a variety of reasons we have discussed before. The politics of substituting a sitting president who wants to run is very complicated. It's like admitting that everything is a failure, and so actually going faster towards a bigger defeat. So somebody says, why don't they put somebody younger and more energetic and this and that? It's not that easy. The politics is very complicated. Even substituting the vice president, we said several times, Kamala Harris, is not easy. She's black, she's woman. These are two important constituencies for Biden. He cannot definitely lose them with the improvised choice. So Biden it is. Republican camp, again, Trump is there. And after Super Tuesday, won 10 out of 11 states, plus the ones he won before, still in the front runner. There was only one contender in the race remaining, Nikki Haley, which clearly realized there was no room for her and withdrew. However, she has not formally endorsed Trump yet. That's an important move because first, if something were to happen to Trump in the in his judicial story, you never know that actually the Republican convention might need to find another candidate. The only one is Nikki Haley. Second, because um, she actually has told Trump to start appealing to the centrist moderate Republican that she represents. And so she cannot simply say, yeah, you know what, Trump, you got it right. Keep on pushing the Republican Party to the extreme right towards populist position. I endorse you doing so. I mean, that would be totally wrong from her side. So, she left the race, left the door also half open to see what happens in the future. So clearly now it's Biden versus Trump.
So, I mean, with this kind of race where many Americans will look at it as perhaps and kind of making an inconvenient choice between two candidates, neither of which they necessarily prefer wholeheartedly, but one that they're faced with. I mean, what does that mean, right? What does a potential rerun of Biden mean? Would he feel less constrained, for example, in his sort of foreign and domestic positions?
Yeah, so uh, it's a rematch because it's Biden versus Trump. Unless something happens, we already said that the Democratic National Convention may decide to go for somebody else for whatever reason, but Biden needs to be in agreement with that. And Trump may find whatever difficulty at any point in time. So far, Biden versus Trump. Oh, these are two presidents running for the second mandate. And presidents after the first mandate act quite differently. They don't have big pressure for re-election, so they tend to act in a more extreme way. They can actually do what they want to do. So Biden, for example, in his domestic policy has already been quite radical, although the economic effects of his presidency, which have been huge in terms of just think about the number of people that have gained employment during his presidency. We are talking about uh, more than 10 million people already. So it's huge number. Yet this Bidenomics is still not making through the electorate. Um, so foreign policy, which is the most divisive one, um, especially position towards Israel in Gaza and so on. Biden is trying to find a very hard equilibrium point between telling Netanyahu not to go too hard without losing the potential electorate that supports Israel and the entire Jewish community that, as we know, is very important, while at the same time not antagonizing the Muslim in the country, which might be part of the population in the various minorities. So it's a very hard equilibrium exercise that Biden is trying to play. Once re-elected, it will go straight to the point, tell Netanyahu to stop this war has gone too far. Whether they have obtained their objectives or not, the cost is way too high. And they might, if they haven't obtained their objectives in these months of, we are talking since October last year, it's like 6 months in a few days. If they haven't reached those objectives in these 6 months, they are not going to reach in the next 6 months. So it's going to go much harder on Biden. Trump, on the other hand, would also be more radical. First and foremost was the deep state, the one that really causes in trouble. He says, I'm going to be dictator for one day, the first day of my presidency, when he can change the entire system with the spoil system that prevails in the US and get rid of those who are not totally in line with him. Um, um, and that would be, I would say, the starting point.
So it seems like, many people are then questioning the idea if this is Trump again, will his term look very similar to his last term in office? His last term was, terribly destabilizing for the American position in the international system. And I was wondering if you could reflect a bit on that. What could a Trump presidency look like, perhaps in geostrategic terms?
It would be a continuation of what he has done. And the differences with Biden are striking. One could think that Make America Great Again and the Inflation Reduction Act are two versions of the same plan, right? Taking on China and so on. But they are actually quite different. Trump's is based on Buy American, High American, America First. And, all the others will have to suffer the consequences. The IRA by Biden is very different. Is you can do stuff, but you need to do in the US, and will subsidize you for that. So it's just another way of getting US influence across the globe and reasserting US prominence, but while building alliances. So it's like the reproposition of NATO in economic terms. The US is at the center, spends more than everybody else, subsidizes everybody else, but then it buys their loyalties. Trump wants to do with NATO what he wants to do in economic terms, which is you don't pay your 2% of GDP, guess what? We are not going to intervene in your favor. And actually, I will incentivize Russia to hit you so that you will learn the lesson. I mean, positions couldn't be more radically different. The other thing that I really want to mention, because it needs to be debunked, there are people that go around and say, during the Trump presidency, there were no wars, there were no invasions, and so on and so forth. But this is total nonsense. All the things that we are observing now are the result of the choices made by Trump. Now, since Trump only lasted 4 years, he didn't have the time to observe the consequences of his action, and actually they fell under the Biden presidency. Let me make a very simple example. We know that the biggest problem that we face at the moment is the Gaza crisis, Hamas versus Israel, and then the Houthis in the Red Sea and so on. These are the consequences of Trump's decision to lead the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action to keep Iran in the loop. The first thing he did was ditching TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership with Japan and others, exiting the Paris Agreement on climate change, and ditching the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Now, by doing so, they effectively told Iran, we don't care who you are. Yes, I know Obama tried approachment, didn't work, you're out of the picture. And guess what? He spent all this political capital in signing the Abrams Agreement that didn't work effectively, because the big price of that, the Israeli Saudi Arabia approachment, the real price for that, which Biden was negotiating, failed because Iran was not invited at the table, and therefore it had no incentive of seeing this peace agreement being reached, because it would be left out. And so guess what? Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in the Red Sea, is a big pro-Iranian strategy, anti-peace strategy. Who caused all this? Trump. So the entire story of Trump not having caused wars or started wars or invasion is total nonsense. We are dealing with the choices of Trump. And if he gets reelected, things will only get worse. We already spoken about.
It seems like, even though sort of two candidates going head to head might be similar to last time, their positions become much more empowered, they become much more radicalized, which and notwithstanding the fact that the world today is very different from what it was last time. There's two wars going on right now that didn't exist 4 years ago. And all of that will very much sort of define the course of how these leaders choose to create both in foreign but also domestic policies. So a lot to watch out for over the next few months as the situation evolves. But as always, thank you so much for your time and insight, Brunello.
Thank you. Until next time.